Oh honey, you think you know Meghan Markle? The Hollywood star, the royal rebel, the woman who shook Buckingham Palace to its core? Well, hold on to your tea because before the cameras, before the tiaras, before the whole Duchess of Sussex fairy tale, there was another Meghan. And her story? It begins in Chicago, back in 1994, with a man you've probably never heard of, Joe Guiliano. He wasn't a prince, he wasn't famous, he was just Joe. A kind, down-to-earth guy from a tight-knit Italian-American family who believed in Sunday dinners, quiet living, and doing things the old-fashioned way. But when he met Meghan, oh, it was like a spark lit a wildfire. Young love, fast, passionate, and full of promises whispered under city lights. Everyone thought it was just a sweet teenage romance. Nobody could have guessed it would become one of the quietest erased love stories in celebrity history. Because if the whispers are true, Joe wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her first husband. That's right. Long before Prince Harry ever entered the picture, Meghan Markle stood in a tiny Las Vegas chapel, dressed simply, beside Joe Guiliano. No paparazzi, no headlines, just two people exchanging vows that would later vanish from every record that ever existed. Crazy, right? But wait, it gets deeper. A marriage the world wasn't meant to see. Sources close to Joe's family say the wedding was real. Not some teenage fantasy, not a rumor. Real. But within months, everything fell apart. The papers were filed, sealed, and buried so deep that even the most persistent journalists couldn't find a trace. Why? Why would a simple young marriage need to be erased like it never happened? People who knew the Guilianos back then say it all came down to one thing. They saw something in Meghan that scared them. At first, they adored her. She was charming, polite, ambitious, a young woman with big dreams. But then little cracks started to show. Dates didn't line up, stories changed. According to one family friend, Joe's mother started to notice things that just didn't make sense. Meghan would mention a graduation year that didn't match the records. She said she finished school in '94, but her classmates swore it was years later. At first, they thought it was an innocent mistake, but the more they looked, the stranger it got. Some family members even suspected Meghan was older than she claimed, maybe born in the mid to late 1970s, not 1981 like her public bio says. If that's true, then she wasn't the naive young girl Joe thought she was. She was older, more experienced, and, as one insider put it, she knew exactly what she was doing. A smile that hid a storm. To Joe's parents, that realization was chilling. The charming woman their son fell in love with suddenly seemed like a stranger, someone hiding behind a story she'd rehearsed 100 times. They couldn't trust her, one insider said quietly. Not because of what she said, but because she was too good at saying it. Behind that sweet smile, they saw control. Behind her charm, strategy. The Guilianos weren't used to that kind of woman. They were simple, faith-driven, traditional people. The kind who believed marriage was sacred, family was everything, and privacy wasn't optional. It was survival. When Meghan came along, she brought something they didn't understand. Ambition. She didn't talk about building a home. She talked about being seen. She wanted auditions, fame, a name in lights. And to Joe's family, that was terrifying. She talked about opportunity, said a family friend. Not family, not children, not faith. Just opportunity. A clash of worlds. At first, Joe's parents thought it was just youthful excitement. Maybe she'd grow out of it. But instead, her hunger for something bigger grew stronger, and her connection to Joe's family faded. She started missing family dinners. Calls from Joe's mom went unanswered, and more, Meghan was spending time not in Chicago, but in Los Angeles. You can imagine the tension. Joe's parents tried to talk to her. His father reportedly told her, "That's not what marriage is." But Meghan, she didn't care. She had wings now, and she wanted to fly. That's when the Guilianos realized the truth. Meghan wasn't building a life with Joe. She was building a launch pad. The family pulled back. They protected their son. And Meghan, well, she slipped further and further away until the marriage felt like a ghost haunting the Guiliano home. But then came the rumor that still makes people whisper today. The secret baby. According to several accounts, Meghan discovered she was pregnant just months after that quick Vegas ceremony. Now, for most families, that would be joyful news, a reason to celebrate. But for the Guilianos, it was a turning point. They were a proud, private family. They didn't believe in scandal, and they definitely didn't believe in airing family business in public. So when that pregnancy news broke behind closed doors, they made a choice, one that would haunt everyone involved. There was no screaming, no fighting, no drama, just an agreement, a secret one. The Guilianos would raise the child. Meghan would move on. No paperwork, no announcements, no public record, just silence. By mid-1995, a baby girl was reportedly born, hidden from the world. She never appeared in the press, never went to public school under Meghan's name, never used the Markle surname. Neighbors in Chicago recalled a little girl at Guiliano family gatherings. She was always introduced as a relative's child. No one knew who she really was, and no one asked. Behind closed doors, Joe was still around. But Meghan? She was gone. She left for college, then auditions, then Hollywood. And with every step she took, she left that quiet Chicago home and her past further behind. To the Guilianos, it wasn't just abandonment. It was betrayal. They gave her everything, one insider said. Family, love, belonging. And she traded it all for ambition, erased like it never happened. When the marriage finally ended, it didn't explode in scandal or gossip, it just vanished. No messy divorce, no court records, just a quiet annulment, filed, sealed, and locked away forever. And with it came one final condition: silence. Meghan would go on to build her future, free of the Guiliano name. And the Guilianos, they'd protect the child and protect the secret. Both sides signed an agreement, never to speak of it again. No one was paid off, they say. It wasn't a bribe, it was a burial. They buried an entire chapter of her life before the world could even discover it existed. Some say money did exchange hands, that the Guilianos paid to keep Meghan's name clean. Others whisper that Meghan herself wanted those records sealed to protect her image before entering Northwestern University. Either way, the result was the same: a clean slate for Meghan. No husband, no child, no history, just a young woman walking into Hollywood with a story so spotless it was almost unbelievable because, well, part of it wasn't true. The Guilianos never broke their silence. They vanished like ghosts. But according to people who knew them, they never stopped grieving, because for them, it wasn't just about losing a daughter-in-law. They lost their son's happiness, they lost their peace, and they lost a little girl who, in their eyes, had been left behind by the woman who gave her life. After the annulment, it was like someone turned off the lights in the Guiliano home. The warmth, the laughter, the Sunday dinners, gone. Neighbors started whispering, "Have you seen Joe lately? Why are the curtains always closed?" No one had answers. Then one morning, a moving truck pulled up in front of the Guiliano house. By the afternoon, it was gone. So were they. No goodbyes, no explanations, no forwarding address. They just disappeared, a neighbor said years later. One day they were there, the next it was like they'd never existed. Officially, no one knows where they went. Unofficially, the whispers say the Guilianos moved overseas, maybe to protect that little girl they'd quietly been raising, maybe to start over somewhere nobody knew Meghan Markle's name. And before they left, one last warning reportedly rippled through Chicago's close-knit Italian circles. Don't ask, don't dig, don't talk. Anyone who tried would face legal consequences. It wasn't anger driving that silence, it was fear. Fear that the secret they'd buried might one day crawl back into the light. And so they vanished, taking their pain, their truth, and their daughter with them. The world moves on, but the past doesn't. As the Guilianos disappeared into silence, Meghan's life went in the opposite direction. Up, up, up. She walked into Northwestern University with that trademark confidence, that bright smile that made people trust her instantly. No one there knew about Joe Guiliano. No one knew about Vegas. No one knew that she'd once been a young wife, or maybe even a young mother. She was free. Hollywood soon followed. Bit parts, then bigger roles, then suits. And suddenly, Meghan Markle was a name people recognized. To the world, she looked like the perfect self-made woman. Ambitious, educated, confident, a symbol of independence. But to those who remembered Chicago, who remembered Joe, that glittering rise came with a shiver of déjà vu, because they had seen this version of her before. She reinvented herself, one insider whispered. But that's what she's always done. She doesn't escape her past. She rewrites it. A family frozen in time. Meanwhile, somewhere far from the cameras, the Guilianos kept living in quiet exile. No interviews, no media, no trace. But according to whispers from people who once knew them, their silence was never empty. It was heavy, full of memories, guilt, and a question that never stopped echoing. What happened to the little girl? Neighbors who knew the family before they disappeared recalled a child's laughter echoing from the backyard, a girl with dark hair, bright eyes, a child who looked a little like Joe, and some whispered a lot like Meghan. She was always introduced as a relative's kid. No one dared ask more, and then, after the family vanished, no one saw her again. To this day, no public record links Meghan Markle to a child born in Chicago in 1995. No adoption, no guardianship, nothing. Just rumors, a ghost story buried under legal silence. But here's the thing about silence. It doesn't erase truth, it only buries it deeper. The whispers return. For nearly 3 decades, the Guilianos kept their vow. No one spoke, no one leaked, no one so much as hinted at what had happened. Until recently. Because now, after all these years, quiet voices are beginning to stir. Not tabloids, not bloggers. People who knew the family personally, one of them, described only as a former family acquaintance, broke the silence just enough to send shockwaves. "We didn't hide her secret to protect a lie, we hid it to protect a child." That sentence, simple but loaded, spread like wildfire through those who remembered the old days. It confirmed what so many had suspected for so long. That the story of Joe Guiliano and Meghan Markle wasn't just a forgotten teenage fling. It was a buried chapter. And maybe, just maybe, that chapter wasn't completely closed. Because some say the daughter, now an adult, has begun to ask questions. Others say certain Guiliano relatives have hinted that the truth can't stay buried forever. Can you imagine? After all this time, the ghost of that forgotten love, that lost family, is stirring again? And maybe this isn't revenge. Maybe it's not exposure. Maybe it's just reckoning. Because every secret, no matter how perfectly hidden, eventually wants to breathe. The unspoken truth. You can seal the papers. You can silence the people. You can rewrite the timeline. But the truth waits. Joe Guiliano has never once spoken publicly about Meghan Markle. Not one interview. Not one slip. But his silence says more than words ever could. What kind of man stays quiet for 30 years, while the woman he once loved becomes one of the most famous faces on earth? The kind of man who's still protecting something, or someone. Maybe he's protecting that girl who grew up far from cameras and titles. Maybe he's protecting his family's peace. Or maybe, just maybe, he's protecting Meghan herself from the story she tried so hard to erase. Because as painful as it might have been, Joe Guiliano never sold her out. He never cashed in on her name. He just disappeared, carrying their secret like a weight he could never put down. The past never stays buried. And so the story lingers, a whisper in the shadows of Meghan Markle's carefully curated life, a secret first marriage, a child hidden from the world, a family that vanished overnight. No tabloids can confirm it, no official record can prove it, but the whispers, they won't stop. Because too many people remember too much. A wedding in Vegas, a young couple full of dreams, a silence that began in 1995 and still hasn't been broken. The Guilianos were the first to see Meghan clearly, and the first to walk away, and maybe that's what hurts the most. Because for all the fame, all the glamour, all the palaces and press, there's still a ghost story haunting her success, one that begins with love and ends in silence. History repeats itself. They say history has a way of circling back. And maybe that's Meghan's pattern. She can change her home, her name, her country. She can trade families for crowns, friends for fame. But she can't outrun what she left behind. Because the people who knew her first, the ones who saw the unpolished, ambitious, hungry version of her, they still exist. Maybe not in public, but somewhere, they remember. And somewhere out there, there's a family who chose silence over scandal. And a daughter who grew up without ever knowing the full truth about where she came from. And that's the haunting part. The final echo. In the end, this isn't a story about fame. It's not even about betrayal. It's about what happens when the truth gets buried, not out of malice, but out of fear. The Guilianos thought they were protecting their own. Meghan thought she was protecting her future. But in doing so, they created a shadow that never went away. Even now, after all the crowns, interviews, documentaries, and headlines, there's still that one quiet question whispering through the years: who was Meghan Markle before the world knew her name? Somewhere in the answer lies a forgotten chapel in Las Vegas, a sealed record in Illinois, and a family that vanished into silence. Maybe the world will never know the full story. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. But secrets, as they say, have a heartbeat. And even after decades of silence, you can still hear it, faint, steady, and impossible to ignore. The heartbeat of a past Meghan never wanted anyone to find. The first marriage, the hidden child, the family that walked away and never looked back. Because before the crown, before the cameras, before the fairy tale, there was Joe Guiliano, and he was the one who loved her first, and the first to see her for who she truly was.